Welcome to this explainer. Today we are stepping right away from standard case studies and heading straight into the shadows. We're diving into a grim, dark, gothic fable, a really profound philosophical allegory about the chilling but absolutely necessary nature of personal transformation. So picture this: a wanderer, completely isolated in a sterile hermitage, wrapped up in his own intellect, who experiences an encounter that completely shatters his worldview. It's a narrative deeply steeped in Nietzschean philosophy and philology, and it challenges us to rethink our relationship with the things that frighten us the most. It essentially asks, what if the adversary you're trying so incredibly hard to lock out is actually the exact catalyst you need to become who you are meant to be?
But here's the thing about existential dread. It doesn't usually kick down the front door with fire and brimstone, right? Moral compromise and existential decay never approach the soul as an obvious, terrifying horror. Instead, they sneak right into your living room. In our fable, this danger takes the form of a stray poodle. It enters wet, small, pathetic, and entirely non-threatening. The absolute crucial realization here is that the admission is always granted long before the actual transformation begins. We literally invite our own unmaking inside, thinking it's just a harmless stray. But the poodle doesn't bark. Instead, over the span of just a few minutes, it begins to swell. And I don't mean like a normal animal growing. It swells with this intense, metamorphic, pressurized energy. It's as if this thing had always been massive and was only choosing, until now, to accommodate the space of the room. By the 10-minute mark, the physical distortion is just suffocating. Its monstrous shadow stretches all the way up the stark wall and dominates the ceiling. For the wanderer, watching this grotesque shadow consume his study, this is the exact moment his empirical rationalism collapses entirely. The rules of his logical, ordered world just snap. As he sets down his quill, a cold clarity washes over him. He realizes a terrifying truth about his own intellect. Actually, it's a trap we all fall into. He, much like the pedantic scholar Wagner before him, had spent his entire life meticulously cataloging the surface of things. He thought he understood the world because he could put neat little labels on its parts. But he had completely missed the volatile, chaotic metaphysical current running right beneath that surface. He had mistaken his map for the actual terrifying territory. And let me tell you, his books and labels are completely useless against the swelling beast right in front of him. But the wanderer doesn't panic. He does the opposite. He applies a fierce, unblinking intellectual gaze to the situation. A purely philological gaze. He looks right at this monstrous, swelling shadow and just strips away the cultural baggage. He strips the etymology directly off the concepts of good and evil until they stand completely naked as mere historical accidents. And under the intense pressure of this gaze, the shadow can't hold its ambiguous form. It contracts, it condenses, and resolves itself into something stark and distinct. The beast becomes a man, a traveling scholar, thin, precise, and wearing a cold, razor-sharp smile. The wanderer refuses the blink and asks for its name. And the entity's razor smile widens. It delivers this incredibly chilling retort. I am the spirit that always denies, and rightly so, for all that arises deserves to perish. It were better nothing started. That's the voice of Mephistopheles from Goethe's Faust. With that single exchange, the atmosphere in the room completely shifts. We've moved from a domestic danger, a spooky dog in a study, to a profound, high-stakes intellectual duel. The wanderer is now standing face-to-face with the very embodiment of cynicism, destruction, and perpetual denial. Now, to the true philologist, this spirit of negation isn't some theological evil. It's not a cosmic enemy or a dragon you have to slay in a glorious final battle to win the day. No, this is a structural observation. This adversary is a functional gear, literally irreplaceable within the grand grinding mechanism of human becoming. Without the adversary, the machine stops entirely. The negation isn't a glitch in the system of the universe. It is the engine of the system itself. So how does this gear actually work? Well, this scratching beast at the door of our lives serves us precisely by disrupting us. It violently unsettles all those warm, lazy certitudes we love to wrap ourselves in. It shatters human complacency. By tempting the soul, by mocking its achievements and pointing out its glaring flaws, this negative force makes it absolutely impossible to stay still. It quite literally drives the soul out of its comfortable, theoretical isolation and forces it into the dangerous, unscripted field of actual lived experience. It forces growth, because staying the same becomes intolerable. The wanderer sits with this revelation for a long time. The stark, cold light of his north-facing window casts deep shadows of his former certainties across the floor. This is a massive paradigm shift. He originally came to this isolated hermitage seeking a definitive word, right? A final truth to safely anchor his existence. But staring into the eyes of this scholar demon, he finds instead the principle that makes anchoring fundamentally impossible. The world is in a constant state of flux, driven by this adversarial friction, and he realizes that understanding this constant, chaotic motion is an infinitely more valuable discovery than any static anchor could ever be. This brings us to an inevitable crossroads. When we confront our own demons, we basically face three distinct paths. On the one hand, you have the failed paths of past scholars. You can hide behind a wall of sterile morality, desperately trying to lock out the negative, kind of like a walled city hiding from the desert. Or you can just give in to comfortable nihilism, declaring that striving is pointless because the negative always returns. But our wanderer chooses a third path. He doesn't retreat. He chooses to engage. He embraces the encounter as an initiation. And that is the core of initiation through negation. He understands that even the absolute darkest negation is ultimately bound to serve the unfolding of a higher creative deed. The friction you feel when you face an adversarial spirit in your life, it isn't an obstacle to overcoming yourself, it is the required condition for it. You cannot forge steel without fire and hammering. You simply can't discover what you are truly capable of creating without first clashing with the force that wants to tear it all down. Here is where the philosophy turns into physical action. Armed with this profound knowledge, the wanderer makes a visceral shift from theory to reality. He literally gathers his parchment, he caps his ink, he physically rises from the desk. He is abandoning the safe, theoretical observation of the world for the unscripted, incredibly hard work of living. The tools of the scholar are completely left behind. The time for studying the map is officially over. It is time to walk the territory. As he turns, the traveling scholar, the demon, the adversary, is waiting at the door with that cold, patient smile. They don't fight. Instead, together they step right out into the mountain mist. And the visual transformation of the hermitage is complete here. It is fundamentally shifted from a sterile prison of the intellect, a place where a man hid from the world to write about it, into a threshold. That single north-facing window now just admits honest light into an empty room, because the real story is happening outside in the elements. It all leads us to the fable's ultimate structural observation, summarized perfectly here. The beast at the door is never what it appears. Admit it anyway. It's a dark but deeply inspiring paradox. The spirit of creation, that force within us that builds and strives, can only discover its true capability, its true power, through a direct, unavoidable clash with negation. If you never let the beast in, you will never learn how to tame it, and you'll never harness the metamorphic energy it brings. Which leaves us with a haunting final thought to ponder. We all have our hermitages. We all have those domestic dangers, those seemingly small, pathetic anxieties creeping into our comfortable spaces. The question is, will you keep trying to lock them out, hiding behind walls of sterile morality or cynical despair? Or will you cap your ink, rise from your desk, and admit the beast at your door to truly discover what you are capable of becoming? Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep striving, and whatever you do, don't be afraid of the shadows.